I'm Cindy, and welcome to Pearls of Liberty, April 3rd, 2011. This morning, we won't dwell for a long time on Libya, but there is some news this week in the Truth movement regarding Libya, and that has to do with Al-Qaeda being linked with the CIA. So Don, would you talk about that?
Yes, we got some good publicity this week, I think. Some stuff that's breaking through to the mainstream. Rand Paul made an interesting response to Barack Obama's speech about the military commitment to Libya, and in that speech, of course, he questioned the wisdom and constitutional nature of committing troops without even getting any authorization from Congress. Apparently there were some members of Congress that were consulted secretly, but we're not even getting close to being a constitutional declaration of war there. But in addition to that, Rand Paul said we really need to look into who we're backing in Libya, because he said it looks like what we're doing is backing Al-Qaeda, and why are we backing the same people that were fighting in Afghanistan? And of course, to somebody that is used to thinking through things, that makes a lot of sense. And at the same breath, the media is telling us, oh, they're good over here and bad over here, and the average American is going, what's that about? Well, it's kind of like what's happening is in this administration and in the Libyan situation, they're going back to the original use of Al-Qaeda. And of course we know, and most people in the Truth and even the Liberty movements know, that Al-Qaeda is merely a CIA cutout, a CIA database of those people that they are funding in the Arab and Muslim world to bring about revolutions and insurgencies to justify the U.S. and the Anglo-American Empire coming into that region. They work for the Pentagon. And with Rand Paul raising this objection, that opened the door to the InfoWars writers to be able to put together a story documenting how clearly it is that Al-Qaeda is 100% Pentagon run. So that's a really great breakthrough, and people are really starting to think, because when you've got us backing Al-Qaeda here and fighting Al-Qaeda there, there's a disconnect that's blatantly obvious to anyone that's even trying to pay attention. So that's a very good thing that we're excited about, although of course the Libyan situation is not getting any better, and the commitment to troops and the ground invasion is looking more likely every day. So we have a serious situation on our hands there.
And this did seem like a good week for news for the Truth and Liberty movement. Unfortunately, Japan is still suffering terribly, and there's a lot of radiation that's been released in Japan. Whether it'll affect us here in this country, we're not absolutely sure. We do have a little more to say about that in a moment. But one development this week, and possibly even late in the week prior, has to do with nuclear weapons having possibly been used to create the tsunami in Japan.
Right, we came across that information via Benjamin Fulford, who's been reporting behind-the-scenes truth-related information from Japan for several years, has some inside sources. He's a second-generation diplomat turned truth movement guy, and with some very interesting connections, claims that there were actually nuclear explosives planted via submarines underneath Japan, and that was one of the reasons why the earthquake was as bad as it was. And we've previously mentioned HAARP. A lot of the people listening to this already know about HAARP, but this is something in addition to that. And even beyond that, one of the things that Fulford mentioned is that HAARP is apparently being used to heat up the water, the magma, or the water beneath Mount Fuji to try to bring an explosion in an eruption from that volcano. So that remains to be seen, but we have strong reason to suspect that the globalists, the elite, do not like Japan because they're a threat in many ways. They're in many ways a predator nation on the Anglo-American banking empire, because they have successfully in the past marketed products, bought real estate, etc. So the elite of the Western world see them as a threat, and they actually do know a lot of the things that they've been up to that the average American is not aware of. Things like 9/11 is not exactly common knowledge in Japan, but those on the inside in positions of power do know about it, but are obviously not okay.
Another issue with Japan, the Truther Girls reported this week about a computer virus that was originally crafted for Iraq computers, and this virus has reportedly been found in some systems in Japan, and the virus works on Siemens systems, and it so happens that the computer systems in the nuclear plant in Fukushima were Siemens systems, and there is some speculation that that computer virus may have had something to do with the poor response of the systems in the nuclear facility in Fukushima. So another thing that Benjamin Fulford discussed this week was that the good guys have what I believe he called the Book of Codes, and he reported that some of the elite are no longer in control of their banking systems, and that's one reason why the attack is being perpetrated on Libya, because there's money to be had there, and they need money because they don't, according to Benjamin Fulford, don't have access to all of their money. So that's great news. Did you have any comment on that?
Yes, it's a little similar to the situation that we had in the 90s with Charles Hayes, that one of my first introductions to some of the financial shenanigans happening on a worldwide scale was way back then, and there was this Promise software that had a back door, and there was this wave of resignation of congressmen that were told that if they wanted access to their bank accounts, they would have to resign. And these were people like Patsy Schroeder of Colorado and other people that resigned to spend more time with their families and no longer became a political force. These were globalists that were stopped in their tracks. And I think we have something similar going on here that Fulford is reporting on from Japan. So that's really encouraging. And his mentioning that that we have the bits of code in our hands, or books of code. I think he said bits, but I'm not sure. At any rate, he's claiming that they have some significant power over these people, and it does provide some kind of insight into why invading Libya. It's always about the banking system. It's not about oil per se, but one of the things I noticed also was that this week the two things that have been set up in Libya are a Federal Reserve style banking system and a nationalized oil, that they've been able to nationalize those two things, and so it becomes clear what this is really about. It really is the same old, just as when back in the first part of the 20th century you had the famous General Smedley Butler, who was supposed to lead a coup against FDR and ended up talking about, after this was all over, talking about War is a Racket is his famous book, and he went on a speaking tour, and all that is swept under the rug, and we don't even know that that's a part of American history, but it was huge at that time. And it's the same thing, that really what's happening is you have the military propping up a banking system that's predatory, and the reason it's predatory in Libya right now is because they don't want to just print dollars and make inflation increase and increase. They want to tap into some reserves, some financial reserves that are already there, and Libya is rich in terms of gold, and it's very possible that they could tap into some significant reserves there. One of the other things that I saw that's related is that apparently a larger percentage of the dollar worldwide is backed by gold than I had previously thought, and it may be as much as 90% is actually backed by gold in one way or another. Although we have a fiat currency in America, the globalists need to transition to something, and they use the gold backing in order to make it so that it's controllable. If they transition to any other currency, it's going to have to be done with something behind it. Otherwise, there's no advantage whatsoever. So, at any rate, Libya is very rich in terms of its financial resources and oil, and that's a big part of the reason that, well, what's going on there.
So basically, that's thievery. They're stealing people's money.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have links to the Benjamin Fulford video, at least one of 5, on our website. You can find it there if you don't want to do a search yourself on YouTube. Don't stop at the first one. If you're interested in these issues, please continue on through all 5, and you'll be able to easily find 2, 3, 4, and 5 on YouTube once you watch the first one.
And I also wanted to mention that there was a great interview of Nigel Farage on InfoWars, Alex Jones' radio show this week, in which Nigel Farage says that the liberty movement is thriving in Europe, and so that's a great grounds for optimism, that he sees that people are seeing through the EU. People are rising up against the EU, and it's often from America we look over there and we see, oh, well, this must be okay, this merging of the North American Union with Mexico and Canada, because it's working in Europe. Well, it's not working. The powers that be, the money powers, simply control the press and don't let the bad news get out. But those on the inside, in the know, like Nigel Farage, who is basically the Ron Paul of Europe, that an established politician who is actually a member of the EU Parliament but is for national sovereignty, says that the liberty movement in Europe is going very strong now as the problems arise with their system. So we can take hope from that the movement is strong and gaining momentum.
That is great news. So we will also place a link to that YouTube video on our website, pearlsofliberty.com. And regarding the radiation in Japan, we understand there is still some concern about more radiation coming here, because evidently I believe it was plant 2 in Fukushima had pretty much a Chernobyl style event. So Don, do you have something to say about that?
Right. I can't remember if it's reactor number 2 or number 3, but it is going into a China syndrome style meltdown where it's melting through the containment vessel, and so the situation is getting worse there, and there is increased radioactivity coming. What we want to do is strike a balance between fear and panic and being oblivious and thinking everything is okay. Everything is not okay, but it's not an imminent danger as if the reactor was around the corner from you. What we're dealing with, at least so far, are increased levels of background radiation, and people should do whatever they can do to increase their body's own health and defense mechanisms. And there is a lot that you can do. We tend to think that if we eat an average American diet, a standard diet, that we're okay, but we're not increasingly, because we're lacking minerals, because our soils are depleted, we're lacking vitamins, or we're lacking essential nutrients of several different kinds. And we talked with our friend Dr. Noah this week about the situation with not only radioactivity and health concerns, but especially as it relates to cancer, because one of the long-term effects of what happened in Japan is going to be increased rates of cancer, but there are things that you can do, lifestyle things, that we really want to help you think about. So here's our interview with Dr. Noah. Hi, this is Don Pearl with Pearls of Liberty, and I'm here with my friend Dr. Edward Noah.
Hi there.
Today we want to talk about some of the different approaches that we can take in the health arena, particularly with regard to cancer and getting our bodies in a healthy state so that it can combat the different things that get thrown at us, including radiation and all kinds of things in our environment that are toxic to us. So I know that Dr. Noah is continually scouring the research to find what are the latest techniques that you won't hear of from a doctor that is in the drug and cover up the symptoms paradigm. So Dr. Noah, what have you found for us?
Hi, Don. Thanks for allowing me back on your great show here. Yeah, if there's any one disease that actually strikes fear to individuals, it's cancer. Even within the allopathic or drug industry itself, nothing scares people. Diabetes, heart disease, all these type of things. You know, people started, but when you say cancer, boy, people really get concerned about it. And rightly so. It's a very, very devastating disease. They estimate that within 3 or 4 more years, actually, cancer will pass cardiovascular heart disease as the number one killer. Plus, it's a very barbaric type of a system, as we'll talk about. You burn, you slash, and you poison people.
Right.
And we've talked about on my TV show and my YouTubes, and we've discussed with Cindy, and we have our good friend John here too in my office today, is that, you know, the science just doesn't support it. For only about 5% of the cancers does that treatment have any type of benefit. So 95% of the treatment for 95% of, 100% of the treatment for 95% of the cancers are pretty much worthless.
Mm-hmm.
At a very expensive thing, which I'm sure you talked about, the high cost that's bankrupting not only this country but the world. Nobody has $300,000 and $500,000 per treatment to give yourself 1.5 months to live longer.
And you're not going to find a cure if you're looking in completely the wrong direction and your mind is in completely the wrong paradigm. You're just you're not going to see it if you come across
Well,
it.
even the research, which is kind of, you know, people are walking and making quilts for cancer and, you know, having sob stories, and that's very tragic. People do die like that. Where's all the money go to? 98% goes into what's called reactive. They're waiting until you have the problem and then correct. Very little bit goes to prevention.
A magic vaccine or whatever
well, yeah,
it is.
Well, they're looking for nothing's talking about prevention, and we'll talk about some of the things. So here is an article that was published in only the most prestigious medical journal in the world, New England Journal of Medicine, and this is the quotation: "The war against cancer is far from over, because since 1972 we had a war against cancer." And it's just as bad as it was then.
Why is it whenever we have these wars on anything, it just gets worse? I mean,
does.
It's a pattern.
It is. And then in the quote here is that the most promising approach to the control of cancer is a national commitment to prevention. So all the scientists knows that's where all the money should be, because when you have cancer, it's usually too late. We spend a lot of money, and it's pretty much plus. Here's another article, not only in the medical journal, U.S. Today. a war on cancer is a bust. I mean, so when you really look at it seriously, it's just there's just nothing there to support this. Makes people lots of money, and I think Don, you were mentioning, or maybe John was mentioning, there's more people working in the cancer industry than actually have cancer. So this is a big money-making type of things. Now their intentions might be good and noble. I mean, you know, I'm sure they're compassionate. They don't want people, but they're part of this kind of scam that's going on like that. That once again, no other industry could spend $300,000 or $400,000 to make you live 1.5 more months to live. I mean, it'd be like, you know, bringing your car in. I said, Don, yeah, you got a problem with your brakes. It's going to cost you $35,000. Well, the car's only worth $5,000. Oh, that's okay. Someone else will pay for it. Oh, okay, then go ahead and do it.
Push the cost down the road.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we don't have the money, even if the government tries it, and so that becomes a problem. Just another one, the War on Cancer. This was published in the Royal Society of Medicine. This is a British journal. The War on Cancer, Failure of Therapy and Research. So this is published in peer-reviewed medical journals.
So you really have people that are on the inside that know that things need to change.
Well, and here's a perfect graph. See this graph? Where's it going? It's going up. The War on Cancer here, cancer is getting worse, even though we're spending more money like that. So it just goes over and over. So God forbid you read the British Medical Journal. That's once again another drug. What's the title there? Lifestyle, not where you live, determines your cancer risk. Exactly right. Because people always want to make an excuse. Oh, my parents had it, you know.
Blame it on genes.
Blame it on genes, which we'll talk about. It has some validity to it. The largest study that ever pretty much put that to dismiss was a New England Journal of Medicine article in 2000 where they looked at 90,000 identical twins and they found out that only 10% of health or disease is related to genes. 90% is due to epigenetics, outs like that.
Important stuff, folks.
But once again, everybody wants to be a victim.
Yeah.
No one wants to go, oh, well, you know, I did that. No, poor you, Don. You had no control over what happened. Your mom and dad didn't exercise, ate crap, smoked, and like that. That had nothing to do. You were just born into a very weak type of body, and poor you.
And not only that, I paid into this medical system, so I've got to get my money's worth out of this thing that doesn't really have the answers.
Right.
You know, what are we doing here?
Right. So here's a study, Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine, back numbers ago, where they compared people who had cancer versus those that did what's called the control, did the traditional type of, you know, big three we already talked about, versus nutritional. For a subgroup there, they by using a nutritional approach, they only lived by 2,100% longer than. Now, if a drug did that, people would be knocking down the doors. That company would be worth trillions of dollars. And here's something, we talked about lifestyle. That's something you can do yourself. You don't have to go see any doctor, just basic understanding. So that's the power of natural medicine in terms of what happens there. More currently, as we've talked about, there's a big concern in terms of Japan. There's radiation going on. You know, it's coming over to the country. To be fair, there's radiation since the 1950s. It doesn't go away. Iodine-131 does have a half-life of 8 days, but it's a cesium-137, strontium-90, uranium, plutonium. I think plutonium is only like hundreds of thousands of years the half-life. So those are what we're concerned about. So you need to be taking action not only now and then forget about it after Japan, but doing certain things. So last time we talked about, you know, seaweed and miso. The real cutting edge, and we talked a little bit before this came on, are these different types of what are called NRF2 mediators or activators that communicate to the actual genes and tells them whether or not to turn on and off. This is really kind of cutting edge. I mean, most doctors don't know about NRF2. We'll talk about P53, osteopontin. They'll go, what? Yeah, that's how cutting this edge is. And the drug companies know this is so powerful. And there's a natural product that has these particular types of gifts of communicating with the body.
So we're talking about herbs that communicate to genes that can tell them to fight the cancer.
Right. It's called nutrigenomics. It's actually a new term. Nutrition and food actually genetically engineering genes, turning them on and off. Because every week, if you go on, you know, any other type of search engine, you'll see, oh, we found out that these 3 genes cause Parkinson's disease, breast cancer, multiple sclerosis, and then everybody's thinking, oh, good, well, I'll just sit on my butt all day and wait for some biotech to charge $10,000 a month, and they'll be able to correct that. Well, that technology is happening right now. We using these different types of natural substances, like you said, these herbs that have only been used for 7,000 to 8,000 years in other systems, completely safe, is already doing this kind of work.
But the dangerous part to the dominant medical paradigm is that these things cannot be controlled
That's
by
right.
the medical corporations.
That's right. Is that they don't, because they don't have to be worried about a patent, that other people can have access. Plus, as we'll talk about, I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier about you know, the cost of this is less than you know, a little bit more than $1 a day. I mean, you know, there's nothing out there in terms of chemotherapy or radiation that even approaches $10,000.
But there's a downside. You have to go out and do it yourself.
You do.
Nobody's going to come out there and say, I'll write you a prescription and take this.
Right.
You've got to take some initiative here, right?
So this product that we're talking about, this is just from the Journal of Otolaryngology, which is a nose and throat 1990 radioprotective effect of free radical scavenger enzymes. What this natural product does, it increases SOD, which is very strong in catalase,
Superoxide dismutase.
dismutase, which actually, once again, a very powerful antioxidant. On the inside, endogenous, this publication shows like that. DNA repair after gamma radiation, SOD activity, and lymphocytes from. So that, all that means is that, once again, these particular type of, you know, natural things that activate these have very, very powerful medicine in the body. This blows away drugs by far. And so that's what's exciting, is here's something you can take. It's a one a day that has benefits all over the body in terms of not only make you have the oxidative stress of a 20-year-old, but protects you from the nasty things that are in our environment.
Not to mention no side effects.
Well, no side effects, exactly. But once again, in the other type of arena, side effects makes more money.
Right.
What
Because
other
then you
industry?
prescribe something else.
Yeah. So you start with
Take
one.
your car in, they
That's
break
right.
it, and then they charge you more money.
And of course, if that happened, you would go to the DA. They would be thrown in jail in about a day. The medical profession does that every day, and everybody just kind of accepts that. I've had patients come in, you know, repeatedly be abused. Well, you know, Mary, you know, you've gone to the hospital 7 times with this drug. You've had 2 other surgeries because the first surgery screwed like that. And they look at you saying, well, that's what you just have to do. Because, once again, it's all hidden. Mary has Medicare, so all these mistakes didn't cost her a dime. You can bet your bottom dollar if Mary had to, after the first accident, or the accident from the, it's actually called iatrogenic Dr. Cause, if she had to pay another $10,000, that would have stopped right then. But she doesn't pay it.
Nope.
Nobody pays it because we don't even have enough money to pay it. It's all on these, like you said, IOUs.
They make
That's
up
the
the
whole
funny money.
That funny money that's not there, and then unfortunately our children and grandchildren are going to have to pay the consequences for our greediness and selfishness that we're dealing with right now. People need to wake up.
No, absolutely.
These expensive type of programs, like on my TV show, one of the directors just had a baby, completely healthy, natural, no complications. How much did that baby cost in the hospital to have a baby?
Oh, they lost a lot of money because the person had the baby at home.
Well, no, I'm just saying, but it cost them over $20,000. Where on earth something so natural, no complications? That's the problem.
Yep. The domestication of people so that we feel like we need a system to take care
And
of us.
that adds
We lose our liberty.
because people ask Dr. Noble, well, how come the insurance companies aren't running to you? They should, because I am the most charming, handsome, smartest doctor I know. No, I'm joking. Is that adds to the fear. If they don't have insurance, they know even having a baby is going to cost them $20,000, so they become enslaved to the
Absolutely.
insurance company,
Absolutely.
and that's how they both feed each other. They wink an eye. Yeah, keep being more expensive because that's more expensive than people are even demanding. You got to have sick care insurance because that's the problem. If that baby only costs $500, do you think you'd go out and spend $2,000 a month for crappy medical insurance? No way.
Yeah.
When you and I grew up, how many people had insurance?
Very few. Yeah.
0 where I grew up in
Yeah.
New Jersey. Nobody. You only went to the doctor literally, like Cindy was saying, you broke your arm, you went in. Or you were just about to die. Now everybody goes in because everything's free. Oh, I have
Yeah.
Medicare, Medi-Cal, I have insurance, I got this and that. And they just walk around like, you know, they don't see how much this costs.
It's just a way of abdicating personal responsibility, and we're saying collectivize the responsibility, which means that somebody else is going to take care of it.
Absolutely, and that's part of the, once again, what you and Cindy discussed is the loss of liberty and freedom here. Because now you become basically like a little sheeple or like a little lemming, you will be pushed around because, yeah, I don't pay for my drug, but someone's taking care of me and saying,
Aren't we great to, isn't it wonderful we live in this system where everybody's taken care of?
exactly.
Oh, we're all enslaved, but we don't think about
Well,
that.
how about taking care of yourself?
Yeah.
Or have, like we were talking about before, critical thinking. Doctor, why am I taking this? You don't know? Oh, where's the science? There isn't any. So why would I want to take this crap? And people do. And then they get a side effect. Now it costs everybody more money. They love that. And by the age of 65, a lot of people are on 13 or more drugs.
Right.
Cha-ching! That makes the drug companies real happy. They pay the corrupt politicians. They pay for their elections for the money like that, and they just perpetuate it. Just
I think that, there has been an alternative paradigm around there for a long time.
There was.
People like yourself came up in that. I knew about
Right.
the things that we're talking about now. It's just that now it's come to the make or break point.
What is?
We really have to either take our health back and our system back and get rid of the stuff that isn't working, or our society is just going down the tubes.
It's happening slowly because companies just can't afford to be a kind of a good caretaker of their employees by giving them health insurance. It's just gotten too expensive. So now less people. So then the government tries to come in. Now the government doesn't have money, and you look around, that's what's busting people.
It's the Ponzi scheme getting out of control.
Exactly right.
in
And
the
that's,
growth curve.
and that's where we're hitting
Yeah.
that critical point, where is now people are starting to say, yeah, I lost my job, I don't have insurance, I was on Medicare, now they're cutting back, and this and that. Well, hey, come and see me, let's get you well, and then it doesn't cost you anything afterwards. Then you just do things that keep you healthy.
Right.
And everybody comes out as a winner.
Yep. And people need to stop saying, oh, the government's going to take care of it, the single payer, whatever way you want to phrase
I
it.
tell my patients, you get one mommy and daddy, that's it. I'm not going to be your mommy and daddy, your government shouldn't be your mommy and daddy, that's it.
Let's grow up.
It's really, exactly. You've grown up, now you're on your own, let's start thinking, let's taking action. This would stop within 24 hours if people had a voucher. So if everybody got their $10,000 a year,
Yeah.
how are you going to spend it?
Right.
You're going to go see some drug quack that again works you up for $1,000 and does nothing? No, that would stop in a day. I have patients that go see these specialists. The best one I had was one of my other producers a long time ago. She has rheumatoid arthritis, which is curable, but we won't go into details like that. Just like type 2 diabetes. Now let's keep trying to raise money for something that is completely curable. Because it makes people a lot of money. She went to see a rheumatologist for $850. Well, she's on Medicaid. She didn't pay $850. Spent 10 minutes, and he was totally worthless, like most of them are. Well, that would stop one time. Because if she had to whip out of her $10,000, that's all you get that year.
And there would be people that would be giving out the information, and it would, like yourself, like you are right now today, and it would be grabbed onto, latched onto.
Of
So
course.
this means that I can keep more of that money,
Exactly.
that healthcare money, and people would begin to exercise responsibility instead of abdicate it.
But
We've got to go in that direction.
Unfortunately, everybody walks around like they have a blank check. Oh, I don't care. I've had patients.
Your
come in-
responsibility.
I've had patients like, that come in here and say, Dr. Noah, I don't care what it takes, I want to get better. And then we look up their insurance, oh, well, sorry, Mr. Smith. Well, then I don't want it then. So it changes real quickly if someone else pays for it.
Yeah.
Also, I've had patients too. I looked them straight in the eye and I've told them, you do what I asked you to do. It's going to cost you a couple $1,000s, but you will get better. They won't. Now they go back to their quacks because they know that there's stuff that doesn't work. Now let me backtrack a little. Modern medicine is really great for acute care trauma. Their specialty comes from wars.
Right.
So when I go treat in Yountville, the soldiers that don't have legs and stuff like that, that's what they're really good for. They come in, they stabilize after acute trauma, but that's only about 22% of the
So,
overall health care.
Catastrophic insurance might make some sense.
Absolutely, right like that. But now it's turned into everything.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And I tell patients and I tell the soldiers, too bad, is that once they stabilize you, you've seen me, you would have been 1,000 times better. Because now all they do is they just put them on more drugs, and of course they don't correct the problem. They've had this trauma, and then now they're just basically a cripple for the rest of their lives.
Right. Well, did we finish all that you wanted to go through?
I did. I think that's
Okay.
enough today. So thanks, Don.
Thank you very much.
As you can tell, I could probably talk for a couple of days on it. So thanks so much.
We're both passionate about
I
the same
know.
things.
So thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Well, we do thank our friend, Dr. Noah, and we will make available his email address. He has access to a form of kelp that is fairly inexpensive, and easily digestible, easy to take, just one capsule a day. And we also have links to some of the other products that he mentioned. He's a chiropractor, so he has all kinds of great ideas about natural medicine. He's also certified in naturopathy. So thanks to him and to Don for doing the interview. And again this week, our Pearl Culture segment is a little longer because we do want to give some time to a film that we saw on Netflix, Watch Instantly, where you can pretty much get a truther education on Netflix if you have Netflix Watch Instantly and choose your films carefully. This is Paul McCartney Really Is Dead, and it's allegedly a tape from George Harrison. And Don has delved into this subject this week and is going to share with us some of what he's learned about Paul McCartney's death.
For whatever reason, I'm really captivated by this because by the whole Paul is dead thing. And of course, I came of age in the Beatlemania generation. I think I was in 6th grade when they were first on the Ed Sullivan Show, and then transitioned through all of the various stages until by the time I graduated from high school that they'd pretty much gone through the full Beatles transition. So it's part of my growing up. The thing about this is that I in the past had never, although I was aware of the Paul is dead rumors, I could never see a reason for it. I could never say, well, why? They were already very popular. Why did they need to have a rumor to sell albums? Or they just want more publicity? Why would they? I just didn't see a motive. So I didn't see, and I didn't think it was possible that somebody could be replaced. Well, after we've done much more study on mind control and doubles of celebrities and studied pop culture in detail, we know how manipulated pop culture was. And I think the key thing that made it all, put it all in context, made it make sense for me, was the work that Dave McGowan with Inside Laurel Canyon did, where I was able to understand how there really was an agenda to the whole rock generation, hippie movement, and I'll briefly recap it here because it sets this whole thing in context, and if we don't get the context, we're missing everything. The context was that the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned of when he left office right before 1960, and then came into power with Kennedy and ended up being the major factor that caused the Kennedy assassination, that caused Kennedy to be removed because he was beginning to pull forces out of Vietnam. They were ramping up the military and building into this empire of the U.S. military as the global police-keeping force. And they expected a backlash. The powers that be expected a backlash. And the whole point of full-spectrum dominance is you control the opposition by leading the opposition. So they knew there was going to be an anti-war movement, and they positioned their leaders in the anti-war movement to be able to be easily debunked, easily cast aside, although they would have a big following, that there would eventually be a swing and a backlash against the anti-war movement, and they did that by compromising the anti-war movement with drugs and sex and loose lifestyle, whereas if the anti-war movement were allowed to remain untainted by those things, they might actually have success in the long term of stopping the long-term globalist plan. So that's all the context for the whole Beatles and Paul is Dead thing. Okay, so without going into more detail about Inside Laurel Canyon, we can see that there really was a strong motive for controlling the culture. And there is some pretty good evidence, anecdotal, but pretty good evidence that the original Paul McCartney was anti-drug, did not want to promote the use of drugs. And that provides us with a motive. Now, I really do recommend seeing the film that is purportedly on the George Harrison, based on the tapes from George Harrison's Last Will and Testament. I personally find some problems with the story, but they're not problems in the sense that they're too wild and out there. They're problems in the sense that they differ from some other previous material that's been released by George Harrison. It's a little hard to track that material because it was actually, if the rumors that I've read on the internet are true, was released through translations of his contacts in India and did not come to light until after his death. Now, the things that are different in the interview or in the film of the Paul is Really Dead film are that Paul's death in this documentary is an accident, and there's very strong evidence that Paul was actually killed, murdered. And the Beatles bought into having a replacement because there was such a large body of work that Paul had done with John that they wanted to get out there. They were at the height of their popularity. They didn't want the Beatles to die. They didn't want whoever it was, possibly the Stones, possibly other people that they speculated might be behind the murder. They didn't want them to be victorious. So it makes sense that they would buy into this replacement. We're going to give you a couple links that will enable you to see with clear photographic evidence that the Paul McCartney that we think is Paul really is a double. And you'll see the comparisons between the faces and the distances. The real Paul McCartney had a much rounder face, and the elongated face and the taller figure of the replacement, the imposter, Billy Shears, really is, or Billy Campbell, Billy Shepherd. There may be more than one person. I'm inclined to believe there's probably just one double, at least in the long term. So it all makes sense, and it all goes to show how manipulated our reality is. The Beatles were very much into being against the establishment, and here you have, many years later, Paul McCartney being a part of the establishment and propping up something that gives us the illusion of change when we don't really have fundamental change that the Beatles were really pushing at that time. So we really encourage you to look into it further, and we'll give you a couple of links to help you out.
I think that's a very good point. Giving the illusion of change without having any real change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as we've discussed, as we've written on our website, there are layers of illusion. So I believe the main illusion is that Paul is still very much alive and continuing to write great music. The illusion that is somewhat below that is this film, Paul Really Is Dead, that allegedly is the tapes from George Harrison. Some people might want to go on a quest, find out the truth, and stop at this George Harrison film. But as Don mentioned, and I agree with him on virtually everything he said about Paul, there's another layer of truth that's below that. And it's more difficult and requires a little more commitment to get down to that layer. You can't be spoon-fed that layer. We try to help, but we don't. As Don said, some things are anecdotal. We don't know the absolute facts. Follow your own heart, engage your own mind, listen to HoloSync CDs to get your left and right brain balanced so that you have the capacity to process this information You might have to turn off your TV. You might have to watch a fewer video games. But what you'll find is more than worth any sacrifice you make.
It may seem trivial, it may seem pop culture, and you may not understand the point, but I would encourage you to feed each of us have a desire for truth, and I encourage you to feed that desire, because what we really have fundamentally happening in our culture today is either you're aligning your spirit with the spirit of truth, or you're aligning yourself with a spirit of deception, a spirit of lies. And it's so much easier to go along with the lies and just pretend that things are really as they say they are. And here we have in our culture a prominent person, Paul McCartney, who is not Paul McCartney. And the deception couldn't be more clear than that once you look at the photographs. So you have to ask yourself why. And it is really, there's a block there that we don't want to believe that we could be deceived to this extent. But we're here to say, yes, there is a lot of deception out there, and aligning yourself with the spirit of truth is absolutely key. I want to also tie in a quote that came from Karl Rove that Alex Jones highlighted this week about him saying to a reporter that said, well, that's not true. He said, truth is what we say it is. We're an empire now, and we tell you what is true. So we have a lot of people that claim to be reporters that are just buying into lies, because that ensures that they'll have a position. They'll be able to keep their journalist hat on. But real digging for truth is something that we each need to take more and more personal responsibility for when the lies are so pervasive.
Well, God help us. And I mean that as a prayer. God help us to seek truth in Jesus' name. A film that we watched last night that we very much enjoyed on pretty much every level was The Ghostwriter. It is an excellent film, has very good actors and actresses in it, and the parallel to real life is quite difficult to miss. So Don, will you talk a little bit?
Sure, yeah, it has Ewan McGregor and Pierce Brosnan in it, and it's a thriller. It will put you on the edge of your seat. But even more than that, it is the director Roman Polanski exposing the neocon CIA connection laid bare, and the collusion between the people in the European situation, and the Prime Minister of England, and the United States government. So you really see a very thinly veiled expose of the way that there is this shadow government that really is running things, and highly recommended. It will, after you see it, if you don't already understand some of the reasons things are the way they are, I think you will after watching this film.
And some Christians may have a little bad taste in their mouth regarding Roman Polanski, but as we were discussing last evening when we watched the film, Roman Polanski was with Sharon Tate. I don't mean present, but he was, I'm not sure if they were married or if they were simply a couple. They were living together at the time that Sharon Tate was murdered by the Manson family. And again, we mentioned Laurel Canyon. Much of what was happening at that time had to do with satanic ritual abuse and sacrifice. And Roman Polanski to some extent was a victim of that because the person that he loved, Sharon Tate, was killed kind of in that vein. And it's entirely likely that Roman Polanski saw some of these things and wanted to expose them.
I really can't help but think that the main reason that Roman Polanski hasn't been allowed in America is because he completely sees through the neocon CIA military-industrial complex agenda and is set to expose it, which he absolutely does in this film. And of course we know about charges of sex with an underage person that have been the alleged reason for him being deported and not being allowed in America. And that issue surfaced again recently, probably about this time that this film was being produced or coming out. So I think we see somebody that is possibly a freedom fighter that at least wants to get the truth out about what's really happening in government.
It was an excellent film. It was very entertaining. The next film that we would like to mention is called Dark City, and it's very dark. So, Don, would you like to comment?
I really enjoyed Dark City. It has elements of The Matrix, elements of Metropolis, that old film, classic sci-fi film, in this world where the people never see the sun and have trouble with their memories and remembering who they are. What we find is that there is an elite group of people that are manipulating the memories of the people in the society to try to learn how they tick, to learn what motivates them, and they don't understand how humans operate because they're sort of a hive mind. They're sort of they don't have souls in the same way that the humans have souls, and they put us in a laboratory to try to understand us. So you can see some obvious parallels there to the elite and their use of mass psychology to manipulate people. So it's very interesting film from that perspective, and the imagery is striking and amazing, and the plot of the film is excellent and will hold your attention. It's well worth watching.
I agree. It is excellent. If you're a sensitive person, you may not want to watch. It's disturbing on kind of a deep level. I found it disturbing, not to the degree that I wouldn't watch it, but if you're very sensitive to film, you may want to read a good synopsis. It's helpful in understanding, as Don said. It's very helpful. We also this week watched a film that's been around for a while, as some of these others have as well. Sometimes it takes us a little while to find these films. This week we watched The Book of Eli. And again, rather dark, but excellent, great story, great meaning, and well worth pressing through.
Cindy had actually seen this film before, but I hadn't because she was elsewhere and thought I'd seen it, so I jumped at the opportunity to see it because I'd heard good things about it, and I wasn't disappointed. It's very good. Denzel Washington is always excellent, and it is a message of faith and God's faithfulness and how the human spirit will always press in to overcome and rebuild, even no matter how dark things get. So it's very encouraging and uplifting from that standpoint, and actually from the standpoint of Scripture being foundational, it's also very encouraging.
Very good. Well, do you have any parting thoughts for this week?
Pursue truth.
That's a good one. Pursue truth. Have a good week.